Toronto Talk Sports and More, episode number 13, Tuesday, June 26th. We're in the studio. We got Milo. We got Courtz. It's your boy, Hez. Fellas, what's going on?
What's going on, guys? I'm happy to be back in studio, ready to talk some sports and more.
Yes, sir. What's happening, guys?
What's going on? How was your week?
It's been great, but I just got to ask you guys a question. How come it just seems to rain on the weekends?
That's interesting.
That's been interesting. I don't know if Mother Nature knows when it's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, but...
So in other words, we get very good weather during the week, and then when Saturday, Sunday comes,
and even Friday.
Pours.
Yeah, it's just pours.
It looks like it's supposed to be good this long weekend coming.
Let's hope so.
Saturday is supposed to be what, 32,
33 degrees. Yeah,
wow.
definitely looking forward to that.
I haven't checked for Sunday yet. But
Finally,
Sunday about
right?
the same, 33, 34, so there should be some great weather.
Good. So we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
One of those things that's out of our control, so not much we can do about that. But good observation, Milo.
Always.
So, guys, last week we got some very good feedback on our opening segment where we discussed the concept of men sitting down to pee. That was absolutely hilarious.
I actually tried it this week.
Oh, boy. Tell us all about that, Milo.
I'll keep that to myself.
Any selfies?
No selfies. At least that aren't published. But
man.
no.
So a buddy of mine who listens to us regularly, he asked me, how are we going to possibly top that this week in our opening segment? And I'm like, we absolutely can't. You can't top that. But what I do want to discuss, and this is something that a conversation came up. I was talking with a friend this week. I just wanted to kind of throw it out there and see what we can do with it. It's an aspect of dating. And this is something we've all, I'm sure, discussed before, considered, whatever the case. And that is, should a man always be the one to pay the bill? And I'm talking during the early stages of dating. So, you're dating a girl, maybe it's the first, few weeks, the first, few months or whatever the case. Should it immediately be a situation established from the beginning where it's maybe a 50-50 split? If she takes out her wallet that she's going to pay, should you allow her to pay? How does that usually work? And I'm sure we're all different, but how do you usually roll? We'll pass it to the single guy first, Milo. What are your thoughts?
I would say on the initial first date, absolutely, the man should pay. I think it's out of respect, and you're obviously trying to impress the woman, so you would want to pay the first time. I would even say the first few times. I would say maybe the first 3-4 times. Yeah, I have no problem paying. Whether it's dinner or a movie or some other activity, which is fine. But obviously, when you build and develop a type of relationship and you've dated her a few times, you would like to see maybe her at least reach for the purse and reach for the wallet. To show
reach is nice. Guys like the reach.
Sure, absolutely.
After some time.
Absolutely. Guys love the reach in many aspects. But, I don't have a problem, shedding out some dollars, trying to impress the lady and, go from there.
Right. Is there an expectation of possibly something in return based on those shed dollars? Or is that
you obviously want to have some fun at the end of the night, and hopefully, it goes that way. But it doesn't always go that way.
What kind of fun are we talking about here?
Not.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, boy.
Courtz, go ahead.
Mr. Married how many years now, Courtz?
I think it's been 4 years now.
4 years. 4 beautiful years.
Yeah, so definitely for the first date, especially for the first date, the man should always be the one to initiate paying for that bill. Mm-hmm. As we get to, the second, third, fourth date, definitely the man should still take that initiative. And I think I have to agree with Milo here, which I don't do very often. But
certainly not in the NBA awards. We'll discuss that later.
Or with our football teams. Yeah. But yes, definitely, I think the woman, she should at least reach for her wallet to initiate payment, because in a relationship there has to be some sort of give and take of a relationship.
Right on.
So I definitely think that it goes both ways.
So what about a situation where the woman, let's say on the very first date, so let me backtrack it, because I know that this is kind of an old school thing where it's usually the person who initiates the date or asks the person out is usually the one who pays. So because we live in this new world and, equal rights and all this progression and whatnot, so suppose it's the woman who actually takes initiative and say, hey, you want to go out for dinner and whatnot, and then at the end of the night, she pulls out her wallet and she wants to pay. Is there something wrong with if the guy actually allows her to pay? So once again, she took the initiative. She's kind of chasing the man, which seems to be a thing nowadays. Right. Is it okay for the guy to allow her to pay on the first
absolutely.
date?
I don't see a problem with that. I mean, obviously, if it's a woman that's established and making good dollars or whatever the case may be, and she wants to treat you, and obviously she is doing that because she likes you and has some sort of feelings towards you.
Right.
Wants
And maybe
to build
she's
that.
expecting something in return.
But there's nothing wrong with that. But you never want to be a guy or a man in a situation where it's like, oh yeah, you get used to it. She paid the first time, she's going to continue to pay.
Right.
You want to always be the one that pulls out your wallet and makes sure that.
Right. So for me personally, and obviously, I mean, I've been single in quite a few years, but I would have an issue with that. Even if it was the reverse, where once again the woman asked me out on the date and she was the one kind of taking the initiative. First of all, I don't necessarily see that happening. I'm always that kind of guy to take that initiative. But even if that was the case, I would decline the offer. I would thank her for the offer, and I would certainly appreciate it. But even on that very first date, or anytime early within the first few months of the relationship, I would, me personally, I would just, oh, thank you very much. I got this, babe. I got you. That's just.
How would you feel if she actually snuck away and instead of going to the washroom, she went and paid the bill? And then you had no choice.
So she went behind my back and kind of took care of the bill before I had a chance to pay. I mean, I'm the kind of, I wouldn't make a big deal of it. At the end of the day, it's something that you would have to, you'd appreciate. You'd be like, okay, thank you very much or whatever. But I would kind of let her know that, I mean, because for me, it is kind of a thing. Sure. Like I do kind of take that a certain way, that I would prefer to be the one, taking that initiative and, paying the tab.
Definitely. Yeah, personally, I don't mind if she were to pay for it for the first day, if she's the one to initiate it. But personally, I would, like Hez said, I would actually go out and offer to pay for the bill, even though I wouldn't have a necessary problem if
snuck away and
she paid for it. But me as a man, what I would do on a first date, I would definitely take that initiative and pay that bill.
You Eagles fans are all the same.
Fly, birds, fly.
What we should do one time, seeing how now we're all dating experts here at TTS, perhaps as a follow-up, we'll talk about where's an ideal place to take a girl on a first date, or what's the ideal first date look like? I'm sure you guys have heard before, certain things like going to the movies, for example, isn't necessarily the best thing on a first date. You don't get to converse and whatnot. Well, great discussion, guys. Very, very good. I do believe we are going to talk some sports today.
We are, yeah.
That's
absolutely.
on the tab? All right. So what we have in today's episode, and thanks again, guys, we will be discussing some World Cup. We're about 2 weeks into the big 2018 World Cup tournament. Things are definitely heating up, so we'll discuss that. We have the NHL and NBA free agency both beginning this Sunday, July the 1st, so a lot of things going on there, a lot of potentials, lots to discuss.
Summer of LeBron.
Oh, yes, a lot of stuff going on there in the NBA. We'll see what the big decision 3.0 for LeBron James is going to be. And for our And More segment at the end of the show, we have a conflict resolution expert coming to join us in the studio. So if we have any conflict, guys, do we have any conflicts among us? Any conflict, anything that we need resolved? Maybe
I think we're good right now, but
for now. But
when football season starts, I think
then we'll have some issues.
Yeah.
So we got a lot to discuss, guys. Let's get to it. This is episode number 13, Toronto Talk Sports and More.
We're back. It's your boy Courtz, and we're going to talk some World Cup action. We're joined here in studio with NWB. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Courtney. It's a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. You ready to talk some soccer?
I am. It's been a heck of a World Cup.
It's been quite the World Cup, and we still have another couple weeks to go, so very exciting. So before we get into any of the matches itself, I just want to get your thoughts about this whole VAR system. Mm-hmm. We saw Iran's head coach criticize the VAR system and the officiating after their 1-1 draw against Portugal yesterday. Mm-hmm. His criticism was based on that controversial red card play from Ronaldo, where he was only issued a yellow card after the VAR review. The Iranian coach was very upset, saying any other player would have received a red card, but because it's Ronaldo, he's a star player, so he gets some preferential treatment. So what are your thoughts on this? Do these star players get preferential treatment? And what are your thoughts on the VAR review system?
Good questions, Courtney. To begin with, I think what you're alluding to is something us football fans will call big nation syndrome.
Yep.
A VAR decision that the likes of Iran or Australia may not get, a team that such as France or Portugal will get.
Definitely.
I'm from Australia.
Yep.
In the first game, France had a VAR penalty. I would say it's 50-50, but they got it.
Definitely.
If Australia's in that position, will they get the penalty?
Probably not.
There's questions. Yep. Probably not.
Yep.
Now, looking at the Ronaldo foul, it was interesting because he's running with the player. He extends his arm as if to push him away, makes contact. Now, I've seen in domestic leagues, I've seen players get sent off for that.
Right away.
Given 3 match bans.
Without any review.
Exactly. So I'm wondering what was going on in that conversation between the referee and Moscow. Was it a case of the referee saying, I think this guy needs to go on, Moscow saying, well, no, you can't. He's Cristiano Ronaldo.
Exactly.
we can't lose that those ratings. You need to keep him on the field.
Of course.
Tell him off and give him a yellow card.
Yeah.
So there's that. I mean, I definitely believe there is big nation syndrome.
Definitely.
Last week, when Brazil played Costa Rica, I think they were probably favored a little bit. I felt Costa Rica are a bit hard done by there. And it's going to happen. Can you change that? Probably not. There are 8 teams that have won the World Cup.
Yep.
3 from South America, 5 from Europe.
Yep.
We won't see any Asian teams apart from Japan go through, and we may not see any African teams go through. So it's just the nature of the beast.
Definitely.
Now with VAR, I think it's actually a good thing for the game. There's a number of things that went on previously that weren't being seen by referees and weren't being called out.
Yeah.
So my count today, there have been 7 to 9 penalties given through the VAR system that may not have been given in previous tournaments. By the same token, no review system is perfect.
That's true.
The NFL challenge system took some time
its flaws,
It took some time to get ironed out. The baseball challenge system that we have at the moment also took some time to come to where it is today.
Definitely.
So it would be good if there could be some sort of, obviously, refinement, because at the moment it seems that the VAR is a bit hit and miss. Some things are getting reviewed and some things are not. And it would be good to have at least one intervention by a coach within reason, because you don't want it abused to the point where if Courtney's team is up 1-0, he's just going to throw in a VAR challenge late in the game to waste time. You don't want that abuse.
Definitely.
But it would be good to have some sort of challenge in place.
Definitely. I mean, what I do like about the VAR review system is the fact that, yes, a lot of times the referees, they're not going to see certain things. And with the VAR review, it gives them the opportunity to take a look at it and get the call right.
Exactly.
Now let's get into some action. Today we had a huge matchup between Argentina and Nigeria. Throughout the first couple games, Leo Messi was heavily criticized for his lack of performance. And today, Argentina was on the brink of being eliminated. I mean, he certainly didn't disappoint today, scoring his first goal of the tournament in, I believe it was the 15th minute. Argentina, they were tied with just a few minutes to go, literally just on the lifeline of just being eliminated, and they scored a huge goal, which ended up propelling them to win the game and to knock off Nigeria and to advance to the next round. What are your thoughts on Messi's big performance today, and how do you think about Argentina pulling this off?
Messi has had a tough time the last couple of years. You may remember he missed a penalty in the Copa America.
I remember that.
He was forced into retirement, essentially. He was hounded into retirement by his own people. He's one of those artists. I think he's an artist when it comes to football. He's so beautiful on the ball. He's loved and revered around the world, but he's not respected in the same way in his own country because he hasn't brought home the World Cup. So when he had that time off in the qualification and Argentina struggled, you could see the difference without him.
Absolutely.
He comes in for the final phase of qualifying. They qualify for the World Cup. You can see there's tension in the team. There's disconnect between the coach, players. That's why they got thumped by Croatia. They're struggling in Iceland. So as far as I'm concerned, Argentina have not turned up yet.
That's true.
The Germans, they turned up against Sweden. They're ready to play. Argentina,
not yet.
We're not quite there. But Messi, you can see it. You can see he's hungry.
He is hungry. You can see it in his face.
He can feel the pressure. He's feeling the pressure from people comparing him to Maradona. He's feeling the pressure from people comparing him to Ronaldo. Every couple of days when Ronaldo scores goals, what's Messi going to do next?
Exactly.
So he's feeling it. He's turning up to work. He needs the other 22 players and other 10 players on the field to come with him.
That's right.
So today was beautiful in the sense that he got a goal. He got some confidence, but you've got past Nigeria. That's great.
Definitely.
You've finished second. So what's your prize? You get France.
It's going to be a tough matchup against France in the next round. It's going to definitely be interesting to see what's going to transpire. Anything else that stands out to you? Any surprises that you've seen so far in the World Cup?
Yes, a couple of teams that maybe weren't necessarily in the contenders list, but they're there now. Croatia, who have a very kind draw now. I'm not sure if you've had a look at the draw.
I have.
As of this afternoon, but now we have Uruguay, Portugal, France, and Argentina in the same quarter. The same quarter.
That's huge.
And those 4 teams made the World Cup semifinals in at least one of the last 3 tournaments. But you go to the other side, you have Spain and Russia who have to play each other, and then Croatia get Denmark. And now the Croatian midfield of Rakitic and Modric, you have guys who are pulling the strings for Barcelona and Real Madrid each week.
Yes.
So I expect them to beat Denmark. And then I expect them to beat Russia. And if Spain get past Russia, I would think that with those guys in the midfield for Croatia, with the intelligence that they have on the two big teams in Spain, they could beat Spain. They should beat Spain.
Definitely a lot to look forward to in the next couple of weeks. I want your prediction. Who do you have to take it all? Who's going to win the World Cup?
The $1 million question, Courtney.
Yes.
The $1 million question. As I said before, only 8 teams have won it.
Only 8 teams. Is it going to be is a 9th team going to win it this year? Is someone new going to win it this year?
Unfortunately not.
No. So who's it going to be?
It will be the winner of the World Cup 2018.
Yes.
Will be.
Drum roll, please.
Germany.
Germany. He's calling it a repeat victory from Germany. It hasn't been done in several decades. But NW is calling Germany to win the 2018 World Cup. Well, NWB, thank you very much for joining us to talk some football. We definitely are very excited for the next couple weeks of World Cup action. And thank you for joining us. Toronto Talk Sports and more.
So let's talk some puck, some NHL talk. We're very pleased to welcome back Launy Shwartz, podcast contributor on barnburner.ca and founder of Stop the Puck Goaltending. Welcome back, bro.
Nice to be back.
Welcome. Nice to have you back. And for her first appearance on Toronto Talk Sports and more, she's also a contributor on barnburner.ca. Shout out to our dear friend Joe. Janice Quigg is here with us in studio. How's it going, Janice?
Awesome. Thanks for having me today.
Excellent. Thanks for being here. Let's get to it, guys. So last week we had the NHL draft with the Buffalo Sabres selecting Swedish defenseman Rasmus Dahlin with the #1 overall pick. Our hometown Toronto Maple Leafs also selected a Swede with their first round pick, 29th overall. Interestingly enough, with the same first name, Rasmus Sandin. And interestingly enough, he's also a defenseman from Sweden. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So if we fast forward, guys, to NHL free agency, which of course begins this coming Sunday, July the 1st, the biggest name on the market, obviously, Jonathan Tavares. He's apparently deciding between 5 teams, one of them being our Maple Leafs. We know that the other day, Shanahan, Dubas, and Babcock, they met with him in free agency. They gave him the pitch. They sat down with JT and his reps, I believe, in Los Angeles. So I'll just throw it out there, guys. What are your thoughts on the Leafs potentially adding the biggest unrestricted free agent available in the history of the NHL, Jonathan Tavares? What are your thoughts, Janice?
Well, I think it's a long shot, but never say never. Mike Babcock is a really convincing guy, and I know that they had that meeting a couple nights ago, as you said, and I think they're going to make their best pitch. I think Tavares is going to look very closely at everyone's offers, and I think he's going to look at, the next few years and see where he can win.
Certainly, absolutely.
Well, I mean, this is the cap era now, right? So everybody's got to be very, very careful. The cap
It's all about the money. You got to make the numbers work, right?
So back in the day, the Leafs would have just said, here's a blank check. We're going to leave the room. You can fill out the number, and we'll be back when you're done.
That's how they do it in baseball. They still do that in baseball.
Yeah, but there's
No
luxury
cap.
taxes there. But, like guys like Steinbrenner, well, I know Steinbrenner's dead, but it was like, I don't know, just sign the bill at the end. I don't care how much it is. I don't really care. Just sign the players. Right, but Toronto doesn't have that luxury. So you're probably right. In the cap era, this is the biggest name we've probably seen in a very, very long time, easily since Steve Stamkos. And it's a very
we know
similar,
how that played out.
Well, exactly. It's a very similar environment. And Lou Lamoriello being Lou Lamoriello and easily one of the most respected names in all the history of hockey. Like, the guy runs the show, and he's a pro all the way. So when he says, I'm going to let him have his time. He can go check things out. He's it's his right to check out the other teams, and he's going to. But when you look at the cap space, and like I said, that's really important. Cap space.
Can you make the numbers work?
Can you make it work? Exactly. And while this year, Toronto seems really appealing with the money, they can max them out 1 year just over $15 million. But then there are a couple of names that are really vital to the franchise. namely some schmuck named Austin Matthews. He was only picked first overall. He's the cornerstone of the franchise, the future. So they got to kind of keep him happy. Sure. And they also have somebody else that Kyle Dubas really invested in as a draft pick, and that would be Mitch Marner, who has also shown, after a bit of a slow start last year, to show a lot of promise, right?
What about Nylander? Is he still under contract?
Well, they did send him a qualifying offer.
Right.
So he's still in the fold. But when you've got problems, shall we say, more so on the defensive end, and you've got a name next year that's going to become an unrestricted free agent in Drew Doughty, who can play the hometown card close enough, London, Ontario, then you got to look at that. What's your big need? So while it would be nice to have Tavares, and there is some immediate cap space, the team that has the most cap space, hold on a second, the New York Islanders.
The team that he's already on.
Exactly. He's the cornerstone of that team already. He's been there 10 years, which some people will say is frustrating because, he hasn't won a cup yet. But let's face it, when Garth Snow is running the show, your chance of winning the cup is the equivalent of his namesake surviving a good hot day in hell. It's just not going to happen, right? So I'm interested to see how it unfolds. Toronto has home field advantage. There was one thing that kind of shifted my point on this. Okay. For the longest time, I've said this is a no-brainer. Jonathan Tavares is staying in New York. But then his girlfriend got a job in Toronto.
So I've heard, yes.
Yeah, so it's not like when Stamkos and everybody was going, he wants to be close to his family. I was like, he flies his family down to Tampa for 6 months of the year so his dad can golf. I don't think his family cares if he's going to be in Toronto the entire year.
Likely not.
Probably not. So when we're looking at it, to me, that's like a little bit of semantics tossed in with the reality of, is he happy in New York? Is he happy about the direction they're going? They've got Lou Lamoriello running the show. Easily, like I said, one of the most respected names in the history of the game, a Hockey Hall of Famer. They bring in Barry Trotz, defending Stanley Cup champion coach. Washington just screws up. We're not going to re-sign the guy, not make enough effort. So if you're trying to court Jonathan Tavares, and while they are going to play Barclays and in Long Island for a couple of years now, there's going to be a new arena. And who are you going to build that around? Jonathan Tavares. So in my opinion, New York is his state of mind, but his heart might go, okay, well, if Toronto can make it work, I can do it.
So from the Leafs perspective, or actually, let's go the other way. So from Tavares' perspective, why wouldn't he want to play for his hometown team? I mean, you touched on it. I mean, he's born here. He's born in Mississauga. He's a hometown guy. Why would you not want to play for arguably the second most successful franchise in the history of the league? Because let me say this, and I don't necessarily buy the concept that NHL players feel there's, too much pressure to play here in Toronto because of the media and this and that. I mean, what pressure? The Leafs have not won a Stanley Cup in over 50 years. So I don't buy that argument that there's pressure to play in Toronto and, there's so much media, everything's under scrutiny, this and that. So from whether it's Tavares or any other players, why would you not want to play, as I said, for arguably the second most successful franchise in the history of the game?
Well, you make a good argument there, Zion. There's a lot to be said for Toronto. I think there's a number of factors that could attract him. So, I think being a super competitive person, though, I think he's really going to look at where he can win a cup in the next few years, because you could see his frustration throughout the season last year.
Sure. I mean, if you have, and I'll throw it to you, Launy, I mean, Kadri, Matthews, Tavares, up the middle, that's pretty solid. I mean, you're solid up the middle. You did touch on, obviously, defense. That's something they're going to want to address. But from Tavares' standpoint, that's not bad.
It's not bad.
Especially if Austin Matthews can stay healthy. If he can stay healthy, they have a good nucleus there.
Well, it's not bad. There was a certain rookie of the year in New York named Matthew Barzal.
Yes.
And that's an attractive factor. Josh Bailey. This is a guy who's inked a long-term contract, and they're seeing some talent starting to develop in New York. Their big problem is goaltending right now, so that's a knock on them. But that's another issue. Why not Toronto? Well, we can start with taxes. Taxes are pretty high here in this city.
Compared to certain
it's not like
states.
real estate's going to be a problem, by the way, though. It's not like he's going to go, well, I'm going to skimp out on that $2 million penthouse. I think his paycheck will substantiate that investment. But when it comes to taxes, and you said it with media pressure, I remember a few years ago when Toronto was trying to think of maybe getting a guy named Roberto Luongo. Mm-hmm. Now, it was already really bad in Vancouver. And Roberto Luongo's like, well, hold on a minute. Everybody's like, oh, no, Toronto, no problem. And Roberto Luongo's like, I hate the media in Vancouver. Right. Why would I go to the worst media in the entire league?
Afraid of the media?
Why? Because you take players in this city and you chew them up,
extra pressure
and you
to perform?
spit them out. And not only that, you said Toronto boy. What's Austin Matthews' repercussions? I don't like it here anymore. I'm going to go to Arizona where it doesn't matter. That's my home state. I can be there and live.
Where it's 40 degrees Celsius
Exactly.
year-round.
40 degrees, taxes are affordable, no pressure, don't care. Jonathan Tavares comes here, I guarantee you, the one mistake he makes within the first year, it's, why did we sign this guy? Why did we put all this money in? He's a horrible hockey player, coughed it up at the blue line. I mean, he's just so bad. What were they thinking when they signed him? This is stupid, Dubas.
This is comedy, folks.
Like, so the city is impossible to appease.
But to my point, in terms of, as I said, the Leafs, they haven't won a cup in over 50 years. Is there that much pressure for them to perform and to win? I mean,
Absolutely.
as a fan, I just want to see them go to a conference finals. Let's play some competitive hockey in the playoffs.
This is a long
You don't
game.
have to win. We know you're not going to win.
The bar
But
is
you'll
low.
go another 50 years without winning.
Remember, this is a real long game that we're playing, and I was off. This year, I thought the Leafs had a real strong contingent, and they were going to make a real big impact in the playoffs. I was wrong. I'm happy to admit it. Washington ends up winning the cup, but
And I
I
think
really
it was
do
because
think,
of seeding, not to go too much into the league. But I mean, you're playing Boston.
I really think that come next year, there's going to be a lot of maturity in the young core. They still have a great goaltender in Freddie Anderson locked up. And get this, $5 million for the next 3 seasons.
That's good.
So there's some real good value in that capacity. But like I said, I think Toronto, they're going to court him. But really, they need to prepare for next year and find a way to accommodate Drew Doughty, his demands, and that they need to build with him. Because I did my homework. You said what's going to be on it, and I'm looking at the contracts on D. And as much as Jake Gardiner is maligned, and his playoff performance was terrible, Nikita Zaitsev was worse. And Nikita Zaitsev's contract is very similar to Jake Gardiner's. So if there's a defenseman to get rid of and buy out potentially, or at least trade for a bag of pucks, it's Nikita Zaitsev. That's the main need. The headaches, the taxes. Jonathan Tavares, he's close enough to be able to come and visit his family. It's crappy weather in New York. It's crappy weather here in the winter. What difference?
So if you were Kyle Dubas, the 18-year-old kid, or however old he is, 35.
He looks 18. I'll give you that. He looks 18.
So let me throw this to you first, Janice. So if you were the Leafs, would you, I mean, you did make some compelling points there. Would you do that signing?
I would.
You would? You think it's worth it?
I think it is.
Regardless of the money and, they might strap themselves a little bit. They have other guys they want to sign moving forward into next season. You would go ahead and take that risk.
I would.
Lonnie, you say you wouldn't do it.
I think the optics said we have to do it. Because this city could potentially riot if it's like, again, it's one of those, what are you doing signing them? And then it would be, what, you didn't even give him a qualifying offer?
Could you honestly say no to signing Josh? I don't think so. You're not in position.
You have to.
You have to sign him if he's willing to sign, and then figure out the rest.
Again, the package, the money, the term, a lot of guys want that term. I mean, you can look at Washington. They just signed their star defenseman, John Carlson. They signed him 8 years, $8 million. Right.
Yeah, hockey, NHL has some crazy contracts. I mean, 8-year and 10-year contract. You don't see that in too many other sports.
You don't really see it very often, and a lot of it has no movement clauses attached to them for a certain amount of that contract. So do you really want to strap yourself, or do you want to go all in? Because they have the cap space this year. Do you want to max and say 1-year deal, Jonathan Tavares, $15 million today, done? Maybe you say yes. But the guy is going to want term. He wants that stability.
Why not?
And you're not going to get that with the league. You just physically cannot move the decimal points on the salary cap far enough to accommodate a long-term contract for Jonathan Tavares.
Well, we'll see if they can make some magic. Last point on the Leafs. Let's see, for example, what else can they do? So let's say Jonathan Tavares, whether they sign him or not, which obviously we'll agree is a long shot, what would you say, Janice, is another area that perhaps they need to look forward to addressing this summer?
I think they have to become stronger as a team defensively. I think there's some weakness in their defense, but also I think that the entire team has to take a bit of a stronger role in getting that puck out of their end and moving forward instead of just rushing to the end and leaving those danger spots when it's in right.
And my question would be: is how do you strengthen yourself defensively? I mean, as you know, defensemen are like gold in the NHL. There's not an Erik Karlsson or a Drew Doughty. Or a Victor Hedman, the previous Norris Trophy winner, that's just readily available. So how do you shore up your blue line and get stronger on defense? It's not easy.
Well, you just said it yourself. They did draft a pretty decent defenseman, 29th overall. Dubas made a pretty astute trade with the St. Louis Blues to get that pick. And he's familiar with them because, part of the Sioux Greyhounds organization when Dubas was getting his
But you need experience on the blue line to be successful.
Even looking at the class of free agency, I looked at them all. The guy with the most experience is Mike Green, but he's an offensive defenseman. And he's aging. His contract is pretty high, but he's a little older, so he might take a little bit of cash off there. But when you look at the plus minus, the time on ice, the power play contributions, and even as poor as Nikita Zaitsev is, he has more points than a lot of the guys that were available. Jake Gardiner, a lot more points and even better plus minus time on ice, just a better overall defenseman than what's available. So what do you do? Just because Jake Gardiner made some PK Subban-like mistakes in the playoffs, you're going to ditch the guy? He's a quality puck possession defenseman, and that is not something easy to come by. And when everybody was criticizing PK Subban for literally going through the same growing pains that Jake Gardiner is going through now.
Indeed.
I'm not saying Gardiner is going to win in Norris. I'm not saying he may ever end up being up for it. But he is a puck possession defenseman that is hard to come by in this league. And when he screws up, it's spectacular. But his unfortunate demise is he's paired up with Nikita Zaitsev, who has no clue how to make up for it.
That we'll definitely agree on. So, guys, there's so much more that we could discuss. There's a lot of things that could definitely transpire once free agency officially opens up July 1st. I'll leave it here on this quote. This is direct from the Leafs GM, Kyle Dubas. We're confident that we can do whatever we want. That's what he says. We're confident that we can do whatever we want. We're open for business. So we'll see what that means. We'll see what the Leafs are able to do. It'll be an interesting summer. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. Launy, once again, you've been with us before. People can find you on Instagram at
STP Goaltending is where you can see what I do when I'm not talking about hockey. I'm actually teaching young goaltenders and how to develop them to, make it at least to wherever they
Developing
want.
young Martin Brodeurs.
Hey, look,
Shout out to the Hall of Famer.
Yeah, Marty. And I did meet Marty once. I did interview him once, and it was
awesome.
That was tough. Because the guy is like an idol to me. I even said to him, it was going to be a hard one.
He's a living legend.
The guy is a legend. Anyway, I can tell you more after we go off the air, but it was great joining
What about
you.
Twitter? Where can where can people connect with you on Twitter?
Yes, where the chirps lay. The Schwartz, number 54, and repeat that. So the Schwartz 54. That's where you can find me. And of course, as you mentioned, a big shout out to Joe at barnburner.ca for getting me in here. And my colleague from Barnburner as well.
Absolutely. So once again, as you did mention, you are a regular contributor on the barnburner.ca podcast. Thanks again, Launy, for joining us. Janice, thank you so much for being here. We know that you're going to stick around and join us later in the show for our And More segment. Thanks so much, guys. And I know you usually like to do your classic sign-off for us, Launy, so don't disappoint us. Go ahead. The floor is all yours, brother.
Until the next time, may the Schwartz be with you.
Toronto Talk Sports and more.
All right, folks, Milo back here with my guys Hez and Courtz. And gentlemen, let's say we get into some NBA basketball talk right now.
All right.
All right. Even though we're in the NBA's offseason, there's still a lot going on, guys. Free agency begins this Sunday, July the 1st, Canada Day, of course. And we all know it's the summer of the king, LeBron James. The NBA awards took place last night, so we'll touch on that as well. But let's begin with the NBA draft that took place last Thursday, June 21st. No big surprise here as the number one pick overall, the Phoenix Suns selected Arizona big man DeAndre Ayton. So Ayton gets to stay local and play in Phoenix. And, very quietly, they've got a nice little core there with Ayton, Devin Booker, and Josh Jackson. But Hez, I'll start with you. What stood out to you in this year's draft?
Absolutely nothing. No, seriously, nothing at all. To me, it was uneventful. It was a snooze fest, to be quite frank. Once you especially got to, the 14th pick, Michael Porter Jr., he went 14th by the pick by the Denver Nuggets. After that, it was pretty much, you just really wanted to see where he was going to fall. Initially, as you know, he was obviously projected to go much higher because of injury. That's why he fell in the draft. After that, it was just, okay, that's nice.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I was a little intrigued by the trade there with the Dallas Mavericks and the Atlanta Hawks. I think Luka Doncic, if that's how you pronounce it, he was drafted by the Hawks and then sent to the Mavericks for Trae Young. Trae Young, he's projected to be the next Steph Curry.
Yeah.
So, the Hawks, obviously, what are they going to do with Dennis Schroeder, right? Are they going to keep Schroeder or look to move him? So,
well, one thing I did find kind of interesting, because it always seems like every year the Knicks, because obviously the draft takes place in New York every year, and the fans are never happy with who they pick, or hardly ever.
Yeah.
So this year they selected Kevin Knox. He's a 6'9", small forward out of Kentucky. And they just, once again, they booed the pick. They weren't happy with the pick. Who knows how he's going to turn out or whatever the case. But they did interview some fans, and they were a little disgruntled. They wanted Michael Porter Jr. And interestingly enough, once again, he went 14th. So they obviously had a chance to get him.
I saw that Porzingis actually reached out to Knox just to make sure he was okay and console him a little bit. Say, hey, it's New York. You're gonna
we all remember what the reaction Porzingis got when he was drafted. So.
Yeah, of course. Did anything stand out to you in the draft?
Well, same as you, Milo, and has nothing really stood out, but that trade, that Trae Young, Luka Doncic trade, that was pretty much the biggest thing that stood out to me.
Right.
Also, another thing that stood out, the fact that the Raptors had absolutely no picks.
Yeah.
And they had an opportunity to potentially get a pick, but
they had an opportunity, but they didn't.
They were looking for that kid out of Hamilton, right?
Yep.
Shea Gilchrist?
Yes.
But he went to the Clippers, I believe.
Yep.
So we'll see what his future holds, right? Mm-hmm. So, the draft wasn't too exciting, especially, the local team, the Raptors, no pick. That's kind of why I tune into the draft usually, or for major trades. But I think there was no NBA player currently that was traded on that night. It was just all draft picks.
Yeah, as I said, for me, it was uneventful. After I saw Michael Porter go 14th, I switched my attention to Netflix and called it a night.
Did you chill?
Netflix and chill.
Yeah, there you go. That's what I was just about to ask you.
All right.
So now, since the NBA draft just took place, we decided the three of us would have a little bit of fun, and we put together our list of the top 3 worst number 1 overall picks in the NBA. So, Courtz, why don't you go first with your 3 picks?
Definitely. So, number 3 definitely has to be Greg Oden. Now,
Greg Oden,
Greg Oden. Given the fact that he had a lot of upside coming into the draft, but he was a total bust. And KD at number 2 had the Portland Trailblazers selected KD. Who knows, how far they could have gone. But that was definitely, in my opinion, the 3rd worst number 1 draft pick. Coming in at number 2, Toronto Raptors and Andrea Bargnani.
Oh, El Mago.
I don't know what the Raptors and back in the day where we're just getting all these European players, but that just did not work.
Yeah.
They had a European GM.
We missed out on LaMarcus Aldridge at number 2 and a lot of other great picks after that. But
wasn't that Mr. Burner account that drafted him, Brian Colangelo?
Oh, boy.
Yes, it was a terrible.
Should have got some advice from his wife on that one.
Oh, boy.
Coming in at number 1, the absolute worst number 1 pick, maybe in professional sports history. Toronto-born Anthony Bennett.
Oh, wow.
Oh my goodness, this guy was. I don't know what the Cleveland Cavaliers were thinking with his draft pick. We had Oladipo going at number 2, Giannis Antetokounmpo going at number 15, Rudy Gobert at number 27. There was a lot of depth in that draft. What were the Cavaliers thinking choosing Anthony Bennett?
So you're basically saying that his career 4 points per game average did not impress you?
Oh boy!
Guys, I think we could have went on the court and scored 4 points. Put it that way. Just terrible. Hez, you want to go on with your picks?
Okay, so my 3 personal, worst number 1 picks in NBA history. So for me, just like Courtz, I'm not judging it solely based on the player ending up being a bust or whatever, but it's also based on who they could have drafted. So the draft picks that went, after them or whatever. So Greg Oden, number 3. So same as Courtz, Greg Oden. once again, yeah, they could have had KD. Horford was in that draft as well. Obviously, Greg Oden was riddled by injuries, so that played a major effect. You know, he was slated to be a very, very strong.
Not to mention, he looked like 45 years old when he came into the NBA.
You know what's so funny?
LeBron looked old.
There was some feature on him recently on NBA TV, and I was telling my son about him. I'm like, yeah, this guy, he looked double his age.
Yeah.
He's the same age as Steph Curry.
Yeah, pretty much. It's crazy. But yeah, that was definitely a bust. Number 2 for me, 2013 pick. I'll use what you chose as number 1 is my number 2, Courtz, Anthony Bennett, Canadian-Jamaican player. Once again, 4 points per game in his career. He had a 3-year NBA career, so that just doesn't cut it. I mean, for a number 1 pick. And once again, Giannis, he was in that draft. Victor Oladipo, CJ McCollum was in that 2013 draft.
It's kind of sad because you do want to see local products succeed, right?
You do.
Yeah, so it's unfortunate, but it just seemed like he was just, I mean, and it's, obviously injuries played a factor as well, but more so, he just didn't seem prepared. He just didn't seem ready, mentally.
Even physically, he was a little bit overweight, right?
Yeah,
so
that as well. Yeah. And I actually saw him at the club one time many years back. In Brampton. So,
okay.
Yeah, I hailed him up. But
no Jamal McGlure at the club. But.
Number 1 for me, and I'll go as far as to say, just like Courtz, for me, the worst overall pick, and I will say in the history of professional sports, not just in basketball. Guys, let's go way back to the 90s. 1998 NBA draft, Michael Olowokandi, the absolute worst pick in the history. The Candyman, the worst pick in the history of basketball. So these are some players that that went behind him in that draft: Vince Carter, Paul Pierce, Dirk Nowitzki, Antoine Jameson, Jason White, Chaka Williams.
Wow.
I mean, you have at least 3 sure Hall of Famers, especially, you know, Paul Pierce, Dirk Nowitzki, you know, Vince Carter as well. I'm sure he'll get in there, whether he's first ballot or not. But Michael Olowokandi, I'm not even going to get into his numbers, stats, just the fact that I'm sure some people who are probably listening to this right now, especially some of y'all millennials, have probably never even heard his name before. So that alone will tell you that this guy was a complete bust. One of the worst picks, if not the worst pick ever in sports.
So you're saying he's not going to get into the Hall of Fame, just to confirm.
Not in the NBA Hall of Fame, maybe another Hall of Fame. That's reserved for another discussion.
That's good stuff, guys. Well, I'll just give you quickly my 3. Number 3 coming in, Kwame Butterfingers Brown, 6.6 points per game.
Played on my Lakers.
Played on the Lakers. Kobe was not happy with him.
Neither was I.
But I will say he's number 3. Number 2, Michael You're Terrible Olowokandi.
Yep.
I'll agree with Hez on that one. And number 1, you know, I hate to hate on the Canadians, guys, but Anthony, biggest bust ever. Anthony, biggest bust ever. Bennett, 4.4 points per game. Just, you know, didn't cut it. Obviously, those GMs made a mistake. The reason, you know, I'll put some honorable mentions out there. Andrea Bargnani, Andrew Bogut. I know he won a ring with the Warriors. I think he won a ring, right? Yeah. But, you know, he had a solid career, but nothing where that was expected of. And Greg Oden, for me, is honorable mention. I didn't put him in my list because he was injured and he battled injuries.
Yep, that's fair.
So I don't really consider him one of the worst picks, but the injury bug obviously hurt him, and obviously Portland's kicking themselves with not taking Durant. But thanks for that, guys. We're going to switch gears here. NBA Awards Review. As mentioned, guys, the NBA's second annual award show took place last night in Santa Monica, California. Of course, the big award of the night went to the Beard himself, James Harden of the Houston Rockets. Congratulations, James, on winning the NBA's MVP. This was Harden's first MVP award, as he was the runner-up last year to Russell Westbrook, who's just a walking triple-double. And, you know, James has really been knocking on the door to win the award for the last 4 years. So, you know, another congratulations to him. But, guys, there is some controversy, as many people did feel that LeBron James...
Really?
Yeah, you know, LBJ, the king himself, should have won this award. It's been on social media today and yesterday. Here's my take on it. LeBron, he was absolutely phenomenal this season. His 15th season, he put up 27.5 points per game, 8.6 rebounds, 9.1 assists. You can essentially, guys, have him in the conversation for MVP every season.
Absolutely.
Right? But James Harden, he did lead his team to the best record in the league, which is a lot tougher to do in the Western Conference, especially with the defending champs there. And although I will say Harden did have a better supporting cast, I do feel he's worth it to be the winner because he's been so close every year. And I feel like he deserved it this year. And, you know, LeBron, he did have a better showing in the playoffs, but again, this is a regular season award, and I'm okay with Harden getting it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I kind of agree with you, and I would ask the question. I actually don't have the stats and information in front of me right now, but Did Harden, and I'm talking statistically here, was he ahead against LeBron in any statistical category?
No idea.
From what I, from what I remember, from what I recall, once again, I don't have it in front of me right now, I believe LeBron was ahead in every single statistical category.
Right.
From points to field goal percentage to assists. Obviously, he's going to have more rebounds. Definitely he played more minutes.
Right.
Definitely he played on a worse team, which isn't a stat, but these are things that kind of factor in.
Sure.
But I agree with what you said. I mean, yeah, LeBron, he's the best player in the NBA. You can arguably make the argument that this past season was his best. I don't know if you would say statistical season, but definitely his best overall, offensive season.
Right, yeah.
Definitely. For LeBron, especially all things considered with, their lineup and the trades and everything that happened in Cleveland. So I would have absolutely no problem with LeBron getting it. I just think that James, it just seemed to be the year. The writing was on the wall, and, obviously the amount of wins that, was it 62?
65, I believe.
65?
Yeah,
that the
Houston.
Rockets put together. So they had a great season. To me, it's not so much a controversy. It could have went either way. If Hez was voting, I'd give it to LeBron, but I understand why.
And just quickly before I get to you, Courtz, I would put LeBron in the same category as like a Greg Popovich or Phil Jackson back in the days where they could win Coach of the Year every year.
It's expected.
Yeah,
it's
you always
expected.
want the surprise or the guy that maybe deserves it, who's been close the last few years to get it. So, Courtz, what are your thoughts on that?
Yep, since 2006, LeBron James has been arguably the best player in the NBA, and arguably he could have won MVP every single year.
Right.
I don't think it's too much of a controversy this year that James Harden won the MVP. I believe that based on all his numbers that he put up this year, the fact that his team led the NBA in wins with 65 wins, I think that James Harden deserved to win this award. But no doubt, I agree that if LeBron James were to have won it, I wouldn't have been upset. I thought that he definitely could have deserved it based on the fact that this is his 15th season and arguably had his best season in his 15th year. He's not getting any slower with age. But yeah, I definitely give it up to James Harden.
And I believe Anthony Davis was the third candidate.
Yep.
In that, did he have any shot?
No, not this year.
No shot for
Not
Anthony
this
Davis.
year.
Okay, that's fine.
Not that I'm aware of.
No,
great season, and is able to relatively stay healthy. So good on him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and let's get on to another award that was a little bit more controversial and has a lot of people talking on social media. Rookie of the Year. Mr. Ben Simmons of the Philadelphia 76ers was able to take it home. A lot of people, including myself, Courtz, we debated this on episode 2, I believe, felt like it should have been Donovan Mitchell. To me, Donovan Mitchell was a true rookie. This was his first year. Ben Simmons was injured, obviously, last year, didn't play, but, I consider him a sophomore. What'd you guys think of that? Did it deservedly go to Ben Simmons?
Well, first of all, in terms of rookie, the NBA makes it clear the fact that any player playing in their first season is a rookie. So Ben Simmons, this was the first season he played basketball.
When was the last time anybody listened to the NBA?
Whether he's not a rookie, he sat out his first year. He got the advantage of sitting around with the team in his first year. That means absolutely nothing. We already know that Blake, what's that guy's name? That light-skinned kid,
Griffin. Yeah.
He won the Rookie of the Year after missing his first season as well.
Right.
Face it. Ben Simmons had a better year than Donovan Mitchell. I think that Mitchell had a fantastic season, but Ben Simmons just had a better season.
Shoot the basketball.
Imagine, give that guy a jumper, that guy's going to be dangerous. But
once again, I'll use the exact same argument with the MVP. If you look at the numbers, Ben Simmons was ahead of
Donovan Mitchell.
Donovan Mitchell, sorry, I'll rephrase there. In every statistical category except for points scored. He was ahead of him in every single category. And here's the thing. When we look at the voting, because I actually broke this down, Ben Simmons, 91st place votes. Donovan Mitchell, 11. So as far as the judges, there was no controversy. It really wasn't close at all.
Right.
91st place votes for Ben, 11 for Donovan. So,
did you see Donovan Mitchell? He actually pulled up in a van that said rookie, right?
I saw that.
They did hug it out, though, when Simmons was going to accept the award, which was nice, right? So I think,
to me, one of the things for me, and of course hit the nail on the head in terms of, the internet, all these little trolls or whatever like to feel that they're superior and they want to try to define certain things. Yeah. If the NBA says this is what a rookie is, this is what a rookie is, you still have people online that say, oh, not a rookie, and this and that.
I think that was me.
The guy's a rookie. It was his first year playing. Let's not go back with that crazy debate.
I think personally,
they both had great years. And one last thing,
go ahead.
Some people still want to kind of put in the conversation in terms of, the postseason, obviously, that Donovan Mitchell had, which doesn't have anything to do with this. It's a regular season award. Obviously, he stepped up and did what he did in the postseason, and Ben, perhaps wasn't so good at the end of his postseason run there. But all in all, the right guy won the award. I think overall he had better numbers. And
I actually do eventually see that changing. I think they are going to implement it to include the playoffs with these awards. I think that's going to change. There's a big debate going on right now.
Is this some insider information?
Yeah, a little bit of insider information. I called up Adam Silver and he gave me the inside scoop.
All right.
But another, just to wrap that subject off, another thing with Ben Simmons, I think for me personally, I just don't like the kid. I mean, he's got an attitude problem, and I would have liked to see Donovan win, but he didn't. But a few other awards that were handed out last night, guys: Victor Oladipo, Most Improved Player; Rudy Gobert, Defensive Player of the Year; and Sweet Lou Williams, Sixth Man of the Year. But we can't end this segment without mentioning our main man, Dwayne Casey, who last night was named the NBA Coach of the Year. He led our Toronto Raptors to 59 wins during the regular season, only to be relieved of his duties as a coach after the season ended at the hands of a 4-game sweep by you guys know who, the Cleveland Cavaliers and LeBron James in the second round. Guys, we've already talked about whether Casey should have been fired or not, but I want to ask you, what did you think of Coach Casey's speech last night, and what some people are calling the speech of the night? Hez, what did you think of it?
I thought it was great, and he hit the nail on the head in terms of all he wants is, or any coach wants, is an opportunity and to have an ownership that believes in you. So perhaps that might have been a little shot, or whatever the case, but he was very gracious and thanking the organization, the players, this, that, and the other. At the end of the day, it was kind of somewhat of an awkward moment, winning Coach of the Year and obviously representing for the Toronto Raptors, which he no longer is a part of the organization. Now he's with the Pistons, so it's a little bit odd. But I liked his speech. I thought it was a great speech, and wish Coach nothing but the best.
Definitely. I thought his speech was brilliant, and I'm glad that he addressed the elephant in the room, the fact that, I got fired. And you see the crowd's reaction, then, he pretty much just said, he just wants an opportunity, and he's happy and very fortunate for the Detroit Pistons organization for giving him that opportunity. I mean, he's a great coach.
Mm-hmm.
And this actually has happened before. George Karl, and who let him go? Masai Ujiri.
That's right.
But George they didn't have the NBA awards at that time, so he didn't have to go up in front of everybody and whatnot. So
if I could just chime in one thing, for me personally, I would have given the award to Brad Stevens. He was my Coach of the Year.
That was my guy too.
But props to Casey.
Definitely.
He
I
got
said
it.
Quinn Snyder, but
I looked like he was homeless last night.
He did actually. No, that's great, guys. We wish Casey all the best, and it'll be an emotional night when he returns to the Air Canada Center as
certainly.
well. Finally, guys, the NBA free agency frenzy begins at midnight this Sunday, July the 1st. And, of course, everyone is going to have their eyes and ears pinned to Avery Bradley's every move. No. LeBron James' every move. But there are some other key notable free agents, of course. You've got Golden State Warriors star Kevin Durant, Nikola Jokic from the Denver Nuggets, Chris Paul of the Houston Rockets, and PG-13, Paul George from the OKC Thunder. Guys, which one of these free agents, if any, except for LeBron, do you think will leave their team from last season?
Well, I think Paul George is probably the most likely to leave the OKC Thunder. Where he's going, I'm thinking LA. I'm thinking there's a good chance that PG might end up. With Doc Rivers. I think there's a good chance that PG-13 goes to LA. As for the other guys, I don't see Durant leaving.
No. He's already
he's going to stay.
It's just a formality.
Chris Paul, I don't think he's going anywhere. They have a great nucleus there. They're not going to shift things around.
Well, they're trying to get LeBron. He wants to have
even if you heard James Harden, I think he said in a tweet yesterday, we don't need anyone else. We have a solid team right now.
And I like that attitude.
Definitely. But hey, who couldn't use a LeBron James on their team?
Well, there are some rumors that LeBron might want to talk to Chris Paul about coming to LA with him. So you never know.
Well.
You never know. You really never know.
It's going
to be interesting.
Well, for me, I think it's all about Kawhi Leonard, and Court's touched on it as well. Paul George, let me just kind of go there first.
Okay.
So, you hear the rumors and, the little competition. You never know what's going to happen. But it does appear that Paul George does seem comfortable in the system in OKC. He has obviously a strong relationship with Russell Westbrook. I don't think it's a good fit at all, especially with Carmelo Anthony opting in for, what was it, a $27 million contract, whatever it is. Brutal. So that just guts your team right there. And he's, not humble enough to take a back seat into any kind of, coming off the bench or whatnot. So I don't see them doing anything. I actually think OKC is going to be a worse team with or without Paul George. I think it would be in his best interest to perhaps look at other avenues, but it does appear that perhaps, he will say, we'll wait and see what happens.
Will it be in his best interest of his bank account, though? Because he's going to be leaving some dollars on the table.
You'll leave some money on the table, but, there's obviously ways which you can, recuperate those funds, via endorsements and whatnot. But back to what I was going to say in terms of Kawhi Leonard, I think that's the really interesting story, obviously LeBron aside, in terms of, what's going to happen there, or who's in control. Is he in control? Are the Spurs in control? Obviously, they're flexing their muscles in terms of, we're not taking any calls from the Lakers, or we're not dealing with the Lakers, we're not trading them in the West, or whatever the case. So I think that personally, Kawhi's in control. I think him and his camp definitely have full control in this situation. If they flex their muscles and basically say, hey, we're only signing in Los Angeles, and I think they need to be even more specific because so far all you're hearing is LA.
Right.
You're not necessarily, obviously, between the two, it would be the Lakers as opposed to the Clippers.
Yeah.
But if he was to say Lakers, that's where I want to be 2019, some way, somehow, you got to get him there. You don't want to do business with them, but I think the Spurs are smart enough when push comes to shove, you got to go with the best available option, the best available deal.
I think a lot of people are saying Boston right now or even like Philadelphia,
But
right?
that's the thing. What assets are they willing to give up with no assurity that Kawhi is going to re-sign? I think that's the best move in terms of, I think that would be best
San
for
Antonio.
Kawhi.
Sure.
And for them as well. Yeah. But I just don't see that happening. If Kawhi is dead set on playing for the Lakers or just generally in LA,
eventually.
They have to make a move.
Definitely.
Great. Well, thanks for that, gentlemen. We really appreciate it. Again, NBA free agency begins this Sunday, July the 1st. We'll keep you updated on the major moves via our social media. So make sure you stay tuned. And I'm sure next week some signings will be in place. So we'll have a lot to discuss then. Toronto Talk Sports and more.
Welcome to another edition of And More on Toronto Talk Sports and More. This is where we step outside of sports, have a bit of fun. Janice Quigg is back with us. She joined us earlier in the show talking some NHL hockey. So here's the scoop on Janice. She's a best-selling author, construction lawyer, a Harvard-trained mediator and conflict resolution expert. Janice is the CEO of Janice Quigg International, Inc. Her company provides leadership and conflict resolution training and coaching to companies and their leaders. She's also been featured on A&E, Bravo, and the Wall Street Journal, just to name a few. She's a regular contributor on barnburner.ca podcast, one of our affiliate partners. Thanks again for being here, Janice. Welcome back.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here, Zion.
Awesome. So
Welcome,
how's life
Janice.
treating you? What's new?
I'm just enjoying the sunshine.
Beautiful weather.
It's awesome. I left my firm a year ago, so
Okay.
this is like the 1 year anniversary of my business. So I'm really enjoying.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Excellent.
So I'm just
excellent.
enjoying being free from the confines of a law firm.
Excellent. Beautiful. So long weekend is coming up. Any plans? What's going on? Anything with the family this long weekend? Weather's supposed to be nice.
Yeah, we'll just be hanging around the pool and probably playing some hockey. My son's a AAA goalie, so we're a big hockey
That's
family.
awesome.
Any fireworks?
Maybe a little,
Well,
yeah.
there you
Yeah.
go. Nice.
Very good, very good. So let's talk about your construction law, because of course there's many different aspects of law. You don't hear too much about construction law. What does that specifically consist of?
So construction law is a really niche area. I find it fascinating. I sort of stumbled into it years ago, and I figured, well, you know what? If I like it, great. If I don't, I can always try something else. Largely we deal with commercial and industrial projects. So if a project goes sour, then we come in as litigators and we deal with the disputes between owners, general contractors, and subcontractors.
All right. And I think I was reading on your website, it was saying that you've never had to go to court. You were able to kind of resolve things ahead of time between both parties. Is that right?
That's right. The distinction is I've been to court a lot, but I've never had a case go to trial in 23 years.
Right on.
Yes.
Very good.
That's amazing, Janice. So, in terms of your other business, you also deal with conflict resolution. So that's pretty interesting right there. So, let's say my buddy Hez here and I were, we were just heated with one of our.
Oh, boy.
We were heated with one another, which has happened before.
Has that happened
over
before?
some sports
You
usually?
and me?
Yeah.
Heated? Come on.
And we're ready to just go to blows. I mean, I'm not really a confrontational person, but let's say that happens. What would be the first steps in trying to help us resolve it, maybe verbally instead of
I think
physically?
she's telling you better back down because that black man gonna kick your ass.
Black men will do a lot of things, but yeah, I don't know about that much.
Know your role, boy.
Yeah. So what would be the first steps to try to resolve something verbally instead of physically?
Well, if it was really heated, I think I would just separate the two of you, put you in separate rooms, give you an opportunity to calm down.
Right.
And then once you've calmed down, then the key really to resolving conflict is to have an open mind and to be patient and listen to the other person's point of view.
Communication is key.
It's key, and listen to the other person's point of view. And, when you're dealing with legal disputes, for example, you can have millions of dollars at stake. And the key is to get the parties to move from their positions to their interests. And when you move from positions to interests, often you can find commonality in people's interests.
Wow, I could have used you like 10 years ago.
So let's break that down a little further. What are some of let's get a little specific here if we can, Janice. What are some specific strategies or specific stages of conflict resolution? So to get from, one point to another, and obviously that final point being, having resolution, right? What are some of the different stages, generally speaking?
So there's different stages of conflict. If as I said, if there's like a really heated exchange, then you want to separate the parties. When people have had a chance to cool down, you would bring them into the room. And one of the things that I learned at Harvard, for example, is have the parties role play. So if you have to sit there and explain to me what Milo's position is, and actually verbalize it, it gives you some insight into the other person's point of view.
You see things from their side, right?
Exactly. And so when you actually do that, because I've had a lot of cases where people have been fighting down and dirty for years in litigation,
and is it usually over money? Just curious.
Yeah, in my field, it's over often millions of dollars.
Oh yeah.
But see, the lawyers get involved, and then the parties never actually speak to each other until perhaps you have a mediation. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in legals later, and years of litigation later.
And so you avoid that, right?
So if you actually have the parties come into the room and have them role play and talk about the other person's point of view, it gives them some insight. And then, when you start talking about how much it's going to cost them to go to trial and the risks, it sobers them up pretty quickly.
But my question is, do both parties have to be willing? Do they both have to kind of agree to at least come to the table to go through that process of, role play? Because if one party, I'm just imagining if one party is willing and the other isn't, then we're still in conflict, are we not?
Well, that's a good point, because in Ontario, for example, they have, mandatory mediation. So cases usually have to go, there's some exceptions, but generally speaking, you have to go to mediation before you ever get to a trial, because the system is so clogged up. They want to really, divert cases out when they can. But you're right, Zion. If someone has a mindset where they're not open at all to hearing the other person's point of view, it makes it difficult to settle a case.
For sure. So you're obviously what I like to call a Janice of all trades, right? Out of all the, and I want to ask you, there we go. Out of all
Master of none. Wait a minute.
But I just want to ask you, out of all the businesses you have and you focus on, which one would you say the most passionate about? What really gets the juices flowing for Janice Quigg?
Well, years ago, I wanted to be a lawyer since I was 12 years old, and I've had a good run as a lawyer. I've really enjoyed it. But what I've seen over the years is, as I, alluded to earlier, is people spending like a ton of money on disputes. Now, most cases settle prior to trial. Now, my strategy as a lawyer is to help people resolve disputes early on in the lawsuit, where where they haven't spent, like a lot in fees and really have dug their heels in. So, but my passion now is my new consulting company, because, helping people resolve conflicts in any area of life is a positive thing in families. Nobody gets conflict resolution training in school. So you have a divorce rate of, about 50%, because in large part, people don't actually know how to resolve conflict. And I did a bit of research in terms of divorces, and do you know that it's actually people avoiding conflict that's the problem, not people duking it out and yelling and screaming. It's often more insidious when they avoid the conflict.
The lack of communication, lack of putting the issues on the table and finding means and manners to address them.
That's right.
It's a lot easier to get divorced these days too, right? Back in the days with our parents, you never really heard of divorce, but now it's just very common, right? So
that's right.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because actually that was going to be my question in terms of, because I know this is what you do mostly, in terms of mediating businesses. But I was going to ask you, these strategies, or can these strategies be transformed into personal relationships like marriage? And I guess you're saying yes, absolutely. And that's what you do as well.
Absolutely. I'm not a marriage counselor, but I'll work with anybody who needs to learn conflict resolution skills. You can look at sports teams. We've seen a few of them this year where teams are imploding because they don't know how to deal with conflict, and it's festering. And then, at the end of the day, the team implodes and they have to rebuild. In marriages, one of my big issues in school is they don't teach kids how to resolve conflict. And then
Right.
as they get older and they, enter into relationships, they don't know how to have healthy relationships. I mean, sports figures have it the worst. Their
Yes.
divorce rate is
Oh, yeah.
60 to 80%.
And why is that? Why is that, Janice?
Well, I did a lot of research on that actually because I'm going to be doing some work with some athletes in the future as well. There's a number of factors though that complicate matters. I think some of it again is just not having the education in terms of conflict resolution. But there are other factors. When a player gets traded and the family has to maybe either be separated or pick up and
right.
move to another city.
That could be difficult.
Yeah,
I would think
especially.
a lot of it has to do with the athletes being on the road a lot, right?
That's
so
right.
they're away from their families, half the season or half the year or whatnot. So that could definitely play a big factor into not wanting to stay together.
So let me
Yeah.
ask another question: Is there a difference, based on your opinion, the way that men would handle conflict as opposed to women? What are the differences there in terms of how we both deal with conflict, men and women?
Well, of course, I'm generalizing, but I think generally women tend to be a little bit more expressive with their words. So
Right.
I
And
think
men are a little more expressive with their fists.
No,
Oh
no,
boy.
but I think men tend to avoid conflict more, so they don't express it as much. Not everybody, but I think that's sort of the general dynamic. So if people learn to deal with conflict and deal with it quickly, then resentment doesn't build either because you deal with the issue and then it's done and you move
Then
on.
you move on, right?
Exactly.
But I did notice on your website earlier that you did speak at TEDx in Brantford. How was that, and what was discussed there?
That was an awesome experience. So the whole theme of the show was ripples, the ripple effect of, your contribution in society.
Right.
So being a construction lawyer, I was asked to speak about the contributions of construction and the ripple effect it has in the community.
Okay.
So I was an athlete when I was younger, and I attended a recreation center. So that was a big positive contribution in my life. So I was talking about the positive effect that construction has in the world, building
That's awesome.
schools, hospitals, YMCAs,
Yeah.
and that sort of thing.
Highways that are always being repaired, especially here in Toronto.
Potholes.
Exactly.
Lots of work there.
So guys, as we wind down this segment, we're going to play a little game that we call TTS Word Association. Are you ready, Janice?
I think so.
I hope so.
A little nervous.
So listen, this is our 13th episode, Toronto Talk Sports and More. So what we've done, we've created a list of 13 random words. And what we're going to do, or I'm going to read these words, and you just have to say the very first thing that comes to mind. There's no right answers, wrong answers, nothing of the sort. It's just a fun word association, 13 random words. We're going to have a little bit of fun, and just whatever the first thing that comes to mind. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right, let's get to it. Traffic,
Jam.
left wing,
Right wing.
M&M,
Peanuts.
tuberculosis,
Death.
adjourn,
Judge.
Stanley Cup,
Washington.
45,
50.
Michael Jackson,
Dead.
Marvel,
At his talent.
I love it, restitution,
That's a restitutionary is a legal term.
okay, Merlot,
Cabernet.
ladybug,
Squash.
and last but not least, cannabis.
Legalization.
All right.
Oh, there we go.
Good job, Janice. That was
awesome.
fun. That was awesome.
That's a good game, actually.
You did great. You did great. So listen, once again, as we wind down, real quick before we go back to your business, if you could just take a minute or so, just tell our audience about the specific services that you offer that are through your website, the specific services that you do, and how can our audience get a hold of you?
So you can reach me at www.janicequigg.com. My last name is spelled Quigg. And I'm offering conflict resolution workshops, training. So I go into companies, I teach them how to resolve conflict because conflict is a big productivity killer in businesses. And I also work with individuals, training and coaching them on how to resolve conflict to live happier, peaceful lives.
Awesome. So listen, guys, if you want to live happier and peacefully, whether you're a business or an individual, hit up Janice. You just gave her website. And what about social media? How can people connect with you on social media?
So I'm on Twitter, Janice L. Quigg. I'm on Instagram, Janice Quigg, and I'm on LinkedIn, Janice Quigg as well.
Okay, so very consistent. We love that.
Nice.
Well, once again, thank you so much for joining us. You joined us earlier for a hockey segment. That was a lot of fun with Launy. And here we got a chance to get to know you a little bit better and speak about your business. So thank you for joining us.
Thank
we
you,
look forward
Janice.
to reconnecting with you again. Once again, you're also a contributor on the barnburner.ca podcast. So shout out to our good friends over there, Joe from Barnburner. Thanks for joining us. Definitely was a pleasure.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here.
Awesome. Toronto Talk Sports and more.
Well, guys, we had some really good discussions today. Thanks again to our guests, Nee, Launy, and Janice for joining us here in studio. Our next episode, number 14, will be released next Thursday, July 5th. We hope you all have a great Canada Day long weekend. Stay safe and have fun. Toronto Talk Sports and more. For the love of the six, let's connect.
Thank you for tuning into Toronto Talk Sports and more. Please subscribe to our podcast via Apple iTunes or Google Play Store. And stay tuned for new episodes, prizes, and surprises at torontotalksports.com.